edition of All 90s Action All the Time, as we continue our look at the 90s career of Steven Seagal. I'm one of your hosts, Scott Murphy, and as always, joining me to break down another one of these Seagal flicks is podcaster, screenwriter, and a man who I definitely think can pull off a buckskin fringe jacket, Mr. Kyle Hintz.
It's great to be here.
But not only that, this week in his long-awaited debut, we also have the new rookie to the pod, very much the Johnny Utah of the all 90s action all the time, Mr. Craig Draheim.
Thank you for having me.
Now we should probably roll on to today's film, which is none other than 1994's On Deadly Ground. And it seems only appropriate, as we reach the season's midpoint, that we also reach peak Seagal. Now, I know what you're thinking. At this stage, you may be pondering, you may be thinking, but you've covered all his best ones, Scott. Well, you'd be right. But On Deadly Ground is definitely the most Seagal film ever made. And if you're at all interested in Seagal, that is every bit as terrible and wonderful as that sounds. Before my co-hosts and I get deep into this one, we'll have a little bit of background knowledge as always. So On Deadly Ground was directed by none other than Steven Seagal himself. Usually I would give some notable credits for the director, but if you don't know who Steven Seagal is by this stage, well, I can't help you. And it was written by Ed Horowitz, whose only other real notable credit is another Steven Seagal film, Exit Wounds, and it was also co-written by Robin Rossen, who doesn't seem to have any other real notable credits, like wrote a couple episodes of America's Most Wanted, did a couple other things, but nothing kind of famous. Critically, the film currently holds a 4.6 out of 10 on IMDb, 33% on Metacritic based on 18 reviews, 9% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 32 reviews, and a 2.2 on Letterboxd. So there we go. That's the high scores of On Deadly Ground for you. So, as I understand it, Craig, this was your first time seeing On Deadly Ground.
It was, yeah. And as we were talking about before, not just this podcast episode, but this season, as much as I love kind of 90s action movies, and I grew up with a lot of them, Steven Seagal is one that the most I remember about him, I know I've probably seen before this other Seagal movies, but I can't remember them. The most I remember about Seagal is the Mad TV sketch with Will Sasso, where he's very serious the whole time, and anybody that kind of says anything against him, he would snap their neck or things like that. And so this was a treat to actually, I know there's a lot of things that I brought up that I guess are common in Seagal movies, but yeah, I'm interested to see what are the tropes of a Seagal movie.
We'll get into that very soon, of the recurring themes and motifs that happen in most Seagal movies, as Kyle is also aware as being a fellow Seagal fan.
Yes, indeed.
So it was originally, before we get into the plot of the movie, a little bit more background detail. It was originally titled, well, it depends where you look, actually. I saw an old Empire article about the making of this movie, where apparently the script was originally titled Rainbow Warrior, which I presume was a reference to the boat, the Rainbow Warrior, the Greenpeace boat that got sunk. But there, also in the Seagalology book, it says the original title was Spirit Warrior. So I'm not very sure which was the case. Maybe both were working titles. I'm not sure. And also Horowitz and Russen's script was quite different. For example, the main character that Steven Seagal plays was originally called Ryan Lynch, And it was quite a different character. It was a kind of burnout, was an alcoholic, a chain smoker, and it was apparently more of a buddy movie where he was paired up with a Yale-trained Alaskan Native lawyer who turned eco-terrorist, and so it sounded like it had a bit more of a serious tone. And according to one of the co-writers, Ed Horowitz, it was offered to director and actor Clint Eastwood, but he passed on the project, although that is debated. One of the producers doesn't remember that. So I got this again from the kind of making of article that was in Empire some time back that I saw online. So there we go. And the character name change came about because Steven Seagal thought that the character name Forrest Taft, that's what he's called in this movie, Forrest Taft, was greener. So there you go.
Yeah. Wow.
Yes. So shall we get into the plot of the movie, guys?
Let's do it.
Well, where to start? We'll start at the very beginning. So we open up on the shot of an eagle because this has got Native American people in it. So of course it'll open with a shot of an eagle, and we get the classic eagle caw sound effect that you often find in any movie that has Native Americans in it. The eagle caw sound effect that was last heard in Hard to Kill during his montage training sequence, if you remember, Kyle, way back to that first episode. He's just at the top of after he's done his bizarre run up to the top of the hill, he just sits and rests, and you just hear that caw, and it's like, oh yes, mystical inspiration is happening. So we actually then get like a totally beautiful landscape shot. I think throughout the movie, the director of photography, Rick Waite, who had previously worked on Seagal Pictures' Out for Justice and Marked for Death, he does a great job, and according to some sources on the production, did more of the directing than Seagal. But again, this is a debated point. And again, kind of tying in with the whole kind of like, we're definitely doing a movie that involves Native Americans. Like we get the score by Basil Polidaris, who listeners may be aware of his other scores on things like RoboCop and Conan and stuff like that. It's a typical epic, pomp-filled Polidaris score, but with extra mysticism sprinkled throughout it. So you know what type of movie you're in. So there we go. So a pretty epic opening there, but not as epic as the hero shot we get of Seagal. Seagal's first moment of self-love when he steps out of a helicopter wearing snakeskin shoes, and we just pan upwards to the magnificence of Seagal, past his fringe jacket, up to him smoking a kind of cigarello thing. Like he smokes apparently in the original script, chain smoker, he smokes like twice in this. And he apparently smokes like little cigars.
Yeah. And he also opens with "What's cooking?" because there's a big fire. But it did make me wonder, for somebody that's about to go into, all this oil and set up the explosive device to kind of, the flames and everything, why is he dressed just so nice if he's going to be doing that type of job?
Seagal likes very strange fashion choices and to have a variety of fashion.
Okay.
It's one of his tropes.
Okay.
It is one of his tropes.
Yeah, I'll start writing them all down.
Yeah. His kind of fashion choices, particularly fashion choices that involve a little bit of cultural appropriation, is generally that's one of the motifs like ticked straight away.
Okay.
It's kind of the many highlights of this movie, Seagal's many jacket changes are hilarious. But it's going to take a long time to get through this film because there's so much to unpack in just this opening scene, from the loving hero shot to the kind of weird ADR where apparently everybody knows who Forrest Taft is and is really just knows that he's going to save the day, because you even hear like off screen like a guy going like, "Hey, Forrest is here," just like yeah.
Now, this movie has so many scenes, and this is kind of what I would get into it more, but we were talking about before, it has so many scenes that I thought, like, okay, obviously it's a comedy, or you look at a more modern film, like I think of, for example, John Wick, where you have characters talking about John Wick, about how amazing and incredible he is, but it's done in a way where the movie is, it's done seriously by the characters, but because of the way the movie's done, it's comedic, or it has that pulpy kind of comedy to it. So I went in thinking, okay, obviously there has to be some kind, because it's just throughout they are just talking about how amazing he is.
No, again, you should add this to your list. Okay. Right. So in any Seagal movie, there will be at least one scene where they discover like something about him, something about his, he often has like a mysterious CIA past. Sometimes it's special forces. Like that kind of changes a little bit, but he has some special training. Whether it be he was a Navy SEAL or he was a black ops operative or whatever it is. Usually there's some dossier on him. Usually there's at least one scene where they extensively explain just how he is the toughest, manliest man to ever man in history. So, yes. But again, like so much with this film, it takes that recurring Seagal motif and just dials it up to 11, which we will discuss much, much more throughout the episode.
Okay, I'm excited. I have lots of notes on it.
So, we get his first interaction with his apparently good friend, a guy called Hugh Palmer, who he's basically saying that the oil company has sold them dodgy parts for the... maybe we didn't explain that. So Seagal lands in a helicopter on top of this oil rig to put out this fire that is happening on this oil rig. Apparently joined by head of the corporation. Like, does the head of an oil corporation fly out to every disaster? Anyway, joined by the head of the corporation, who is Michael Jennings, who is played by none other than Michael Caine.
With a American accent that fades in and out from his normal Michael Caine accent.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, he can do an American accent.
Yeah.
He just doesn't bother here. It's like, there's actually, in the background research as well, there's a great quote from Michael Caine where he talks about this movie. Basically, he took this movie on because this was at a time in his career where scripts had kind of dried up a little bit, and he felt that he'd rather be working than not working. So he went with this. But there's a great quote from him that says, "I had broken one of the cardinal rules of bad movies. If you're going to do a bad movie, at least do it in a great location. Here I was doing a movie where the work was freezing my brain and the weather was freezing my arse." Michael Caine was very much aware of what movie he was in, even if Steven Seagal was not. Anyway, we should probably talk more about this opening scene, because it only gets better from here. Hugh Palmer basically accuses him of being a big fat traitor, Mr. Forrest Taft, who's now working for this oil corporation as a firefighter, and Seagal then he basically calls him a kind of sellout whore, and Seagal has the great line, for $350,000 I'd fuck anything once. Leads to so many questions. But that's not even the best bit, guys. We're in this opening scene. We've already had a bizarre one-liner. Everybody knowing how amazing Seagal is right off the bat, and that hero shot. But no, it gets only better from there, because apparently you can put out a fire with a giant explosion again,
You
I'm not
actually
sure-
can do that.
Yeah,
Can
isn't
you?
that-
Yeah,
What's
if
That's
it's
the
an
thing.
oil fire,
Yeah, you have to do
Yeah.
the explosion. Yeah.
you would have to.
Okay,
actually.
so they got that accurate. Oh, that's well done. Well done them. So like, I didn't know that. So 1-0 Seagal there. But like, I think it's not that's the really funny thing. The really funny thing is the way he sets off the explosion, and then
Yes.
everybody ducks down on the rig, apart from Seagal, who has his back to the explosion and has the coolest non-reaction to an explosion that has possibly ever been filmed.
But before that, I have to say that he's in the machinery while it's being sprayed with oil and there's fire everywhere, and he has that the heat shield basically.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a piece of like sheet metal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's telling people, but here's the thing: they're in a ways away. There's all this destruction, all this noise. He's telling people like to move the crane or to get back or things like that.
Yeah,
but he's
duck
saying
down
it
and
at
stuff.
at a completely normal level of. I was sitting there like, how is anybody hearing what he's saying right now?
It doesn't matter. He's in charge.
Yeah.
This is going to come up again because he does it in some other scenes, but there's like, he just kind of orders people around whether they should be taking his orders or not. Frequently.
Okay.
That is absolutely true. It is the Seagal way.
Okay.
Again, something that you will learn on the kind of you've joined. I mean, like you've joined us at a funny point in the season, Craig. I'm not going to lie. It's really kind of Kyle and I have had all the goodness, and you're joining us for the downfall.
Yeah, there were other filmmakers making the previous films.
Okay.
Oh dear, yeah. Oh, you've got some excitement to come, but let's get back to this movie. We're not even got out the opening scene, but yeah. So they kind of have like a kind of weird, because at this stage, Forrest Taft is still working for the corporation, so apparently is okay with what Michael Jennings, the Michael Caine character, is doing. So there's no real reason for them to have a face-off at this point in the film before he's discovered that his pal Hugh Palmer is entirely correct and it's all down to dodgy equipment and not human error. But yeah, we get a weird face-off.
And we get Seagal drinking out of a flask, which seems like it's a remnant of a prior draft of the script.
It is a remnant of the prior draft of the script. Yes, apparently Seagal didn't want to kind of taint his image or whatever for his fans, so didn't want to portray an alcoholic, but as a compromise. Like that's the only hint towards it. Like he would sip out this flask. That was it.
Well, he has a couple. Well, we'll get
he's at the bar.
Second. Yeah, the bar.
Yeah,
he
he's
has,
at
I
the-
think, like
he
3
is-
shots or something. Or
Yeah. So again, that's as far as he allowed that element of the story from the original draft to go through. Because obviously, Seagal made a bunch of changes. Some of his biggest ones come up much later in the film.
Okay.
We also should note that the faulty part that's going to come up a million times is faulty preventers, which we hear about for like 30 minutes before we actually kind of understand what that even is.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing's very well explained.
I think it's one of those. It felt like one of those elements of like, yeah, that makes sense. That's a term that they use, but nobody actually did the research and the scripting.
Yeah, it feels just like a MacGuffin. Like we'll throw this in there. It doesn't matter.
It's a oil flux maker. It's just like
It's a flux capacitor.
yeah.
We don't know what it is. We're just saying jargony terms that we think sound technical. So there you go. Anyway, after that, we cut to them back in the helicopter where Michael Caine basically explains, like, why would he do this? Why would he damage his own rig? And we should also mention that, as much as I love Michael Caine, his dye job that he has in this film is horrendous. He has this alarmingly black hair. It's just like, it's distracting. In every scene he's in, it's really distracting. You just look at the dye job and you're like, why? Why was this a character choice?
I think it adds to the character because you look at, because it makes me think of somebody like Trump, where I'm like, you know what I mean, where it's so obvious, but that person doesn't know it.
Well, they even have his makeup, like that he's wearing obvious makeup, and he has that orange tint almost.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, so he kind of explains, like, why would he do this to his own oil rig, that he would have the kind of native tribes people after him, the tribe council, he would have, environmentalists after. He makes an entirely fair point. He's completely lying, but it seems like an entirely fair point. And he is guarded by his two henchmen, Magruder, who is played by John C. McGinley, who is very much a kind of John C. McGinley type, and Otto, who is a silent, deadly block of a man, which is very much a kind of Sven O. Thorson type, and he is played by Sven O. Thorson. So well done on that. Well done on the casting. But so after that, we cut to a bar. Now, Craig, you need to add this to your list.
Okay.
Because generally, it is a known fact in a Seagal movie, when Seagal enters a bar, a fight will ensue.
Okay.
Yes, always.
Well, nearly always. Remember, we covered Mark for Death, and a fight did ensue, but he didn't really take much part in it. He just
until the end.
Until the end.
He couldn't resist.
Nah, he had to get the last punch in. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So,
Craig, do you want to take this one? Do you want to break down this barroom fight that happens?
He's already at a table drinking, and there is a group of oil rig men they're messing with kind of Native American man who's obviously drunk, and he's he just wants some money to have a drink or stuff like that, and they keep like taunting him, and then this happens actually 2 times, right, where he walks back up to them, they offer him beer, and then they'll kick him on the ground and kick him around and stuff. And so Seagal gets up, he's walking towards them. You think it's going to be a confrontation, and he just walks to the bar, where then he has a conversation with
Hugh Palmer, his good friend Hugh Palmer.
Yes, and they kind of talk about that, and Palmer says to look at the files, things like that, while he's drinking more. But
I should also point out as well, in that little bit of conversation, they talk about how 3 people died on the rig, including Forrest Taft's good friend Lorenzo, who is never mentioned again.
No, and he doesn't seem to even care that much. He's just, there's not even like poor Lorenzo.
Oh, Lorenzo!
Like,
God damn it!
And again, that's kind of a trope of Seagal being unable to show any emotion in order to service the story.
So these the 4 oil rig men are upset for some reason that he walked past them, and they keep taunting him with words like pansy or things like that.
Cupcake is the term that they use. The term that they use the most.
And so Seagal can't take it anymore, and the bartender says, "Don't break anything this time, Forrest," which obviously he goes out of his way to break everything.
Let's back up just a second. She says, "Forrest, don't you break anything," which makes it sound like this is like a weekly occurrence.
Yeah.
Yes.
But apparently it's like he doesn't even listen to her. A lot of the stuff he does during this fight, he would have to go out of his way to specifically break the stuff. Which, it's kind of rude on his part. But then a fight ensues with all of these oil rig men. And some of them are actually, I wrote this down in my notes, it's not like they're even, a couple of them, yes, they're tough, they're built guys. But many
The
of
first
them
guy he kicks
are like,
is a big dude.
but then he breaks like this guy's leg and punches him, and it's this guy that looks like he has to be in his 60s. How can you be that tough about that?
Dude, and that's the guy who says, "Don't mess with oil workers."
Yeah.
I wrote this one down because you're right, Craig. There is like a few of them who look like they're maybe in their late 50s or maybe even early 60s and like kind of close to retirement. Like the guy he like puts through the jukebox, he looks quite old, and the guy who says, "Hey buddy, don't be fucking with oil workers," like he looks like he's deep into his 50s. It does seem quite unfair.
Yeah. So then after all is said and done, he gets to the final guy who is played by
Mike Starr.
Yeah, there we go. Mike Starr.
Yeah.
Who seems to be playing America in 2020.
I used to play in truck. This I do want to point out one thing though as well, right? So this guy is basically Trump's America, and he's hanging out with his pals, being all very racist and xenophobic and homophobic and all that, and taunting the Native American guy, right? But the group of oil workers that he is obviously the leader of, oddly multi-ethnic. There's a couple of black guys. There's an Asian guy who knows martial arts because, of course, he does. You know, I just thought that was an interesting thing.
Oh, definitely. I think it's weird that the final fight between them, if you can even call it that, comes down to something that isn't that macho. Even Seagal is saying, "Oh, you're the manliest man." That's what everybody's sitting around watching, and because they all know apparently what is about to come, and they do that hand slap thing where where you have your hands under somebody else's hands and you try and slap them, and if he slaps the guy's hands, they gets to punch him, and so they do that. And he slaps his hands about 3 times. And each time he punches them afterwards. And apparently he has Starr has blood on his face at one point early on in the punch, or early on, I think after the second punch. Like, well, that doesn't make any sense because he was hit in the gut. Why does he have blood on the side of his face? But then isn't there in another shot. But I won't even get into all of that specific. That's just me being
this episode is going to take too long if we unpick all of that. But yes, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. I mean, I suppose he might have landed on some of the broken glass that was around. We'll go with that.
Okay, that's what we'll go with. But then it gets to one of my favorite lines in the movie. Probably the best line is that after the guy gets up for the 3rd time, broken nose, everything, Seagal says, "What does it take to change the essence of a man?" To which Starr replies, after contemplating it for a bit and almost on the verge of tears, that it's time to change. Was it time to change?
No, he just says, like, "I need time."
I need time.
Yeah, there we go. And then they kind of have this nice little moment.
And this stands out to me so much because it feels like the end of a movie.
Yeah.
Which this is not. It's so weird.
It does feel like the end of a movie. I would agree with that. Or it's a weird thing, though, as well, where you kind of think, like, oh, maybe this will be, like, called back to. Like, maybe this guy will have been converted. Like, he's seen the error of his ways, and then maybe he helps out Seagal later on in the movie. That doesn't happen. It's just a scene just to show the amazing, inspirational, stroke badass figure that Steven Seagal is.
Yeah.
We should also add... No, they don't. Not even the drunk guy who seems to be his friend. But I have to add at the very end, too, so the native man who is an alcoholic, it seems, or whatever, who has been kind of rescued by Seagal. Seagal says he's going to give him a ride home or vice versa. I think the guy says he's going to give Seagal a ride home and they're going to go on like a spiritual journey or something. And Seagal has his classic, just like smug, like smile and nod, like, yeah, right. Like he's still demeaning to the people he's saving, basically. You're like, what
That
an
is
asshole.
true. Yeah, because he likes to try and he's trying to portray himself in this scene as like the champion of the underdog, the little guy, you know, like that kind of thing. But at the same time, he does it in this kind of incredibly patronizing way. In fact, at one point during the hand slap game, he kind of tells the guy off for picking on this little native man, which is, yep.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, he's somebody that I probably wouldn't, if this is a regular occurrence, and I was the bar owner, I'd be like, maybe you shouldn't come in here anymore. You're not allowed in here if you're going to break all this stuff.
And all your patrons are oil workers looking for a fight.
Well, apparently only half the patrons are oil workers looking for the fight. It seems like half the patrons, because like the oil workers seem completely unaware of the mightiness of Forrest Taft. But then half the bar are like locals, and again, using kind of ADR, there's like all these kind of off-screen comments of like, oh, you know, like, you know, don't do it, Forrest, you know, like, oh, you know, like, because, you know, obviously he can fuck these guys up. So, you know, so you hear all these kind of comments.
That's true, which makes it even weirder how, like, racist the oil workers are when the other half of the bar is Native American people.
Well, there's all the ADR too of like, oh man, don't be so mean to that guy.
Yeah, like apparently everybody's kind of too scared to do anything about it. But yeah, you do get all these off-screen comments of like, hey, leave that guy alone.
But it kind of has an issue. So if all the locals know him, and from the scene before, everybody on that oil rig happened to know who he was. So were these just the few members of the oil rig that
yeah, like
this is kind of a trope where it's like the bullies never know what they're getting into. Basically,
that's true. Everybody who's good in the film has an entire awareness of like Seagal's character's entire back history and how badass he is. But yeah, the kind of bullies and villains, no idea.
Okay, I have notes on that, and with Michael Caine later on. We'll get to that.
Okay. One last thing about this scene, I did really like the guy who he hits in the nuts, and he just goes, "Oh, my nuts!"
Yes,
so good.
Yes.
Oh dear. Okay. But that's the bar. And to be fair, it's a fun bar fight. It's not quite the barroom brawl in Out for Justice, but it's a top action sequence and highly enjoyable.
I agree. I mean, it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you say, I mean, it's a bit unfair. It's just because all those guys, most of those guys do seem like they really hold no challenge. It's just that one guy, just that one big guy steps. Like, obviously, Seagal's very much aware of prison yard rules where you take out the big guy first because he just boots him. And that apparently completely incapacitates that guy.
Yeah. All he needs is to be kicked in the chest, and that's it.
But, Kyle, what's Jennings up to?
He is working on his pro-environmental commercial, it seems, with some caribou on a set with, as we talked about before, a cameo by Irving Kershner as a commercial director. And this
we should point out, just in case any of our listeners don't know, Irving Kershner, director of Empire Strikes Back.
Yes, a much inferior film to the one we're discussing.
This should have had its own universe.
Yes. But Michael Caine is a total asshole to this director, and then kind of switches character to sound like to read these cue cards and sound like he cares about the environment. And I was telling Craig about this because he has something he's going to say, but also I felt like the way Michael Caine treats the director is probably the way Seagal behaves on his film sets. Just totally dismissive.
Yeah, yeah. So, Craig, what were you going to say about this thing?
So, obviously, we're watching a Seagal movie, but I couldn't help, I guess, the movie in my head that would be like, oh, here would be a movie that I would definitely watch. Was Michael Caine in this is kind of like his character is kind of funny, and like if they made some sort of like, what if it was just about him and like some satirical black comedy about an oil tycoon trying to like pull one over on everybody to, get more money and all the problems that he's facing. And so that was the movie that I came up with as I'm watching this whole scene lay out. And then with his whole team and everything, and it had nothing to do with Seagal. So maybe someday I'll come up with that version.
Yes.
Okay.
Because there are, again, as I mentioned before, and I'll probably keep mentioning throughout, there's so many elements, as a novice to Seagal, that like this lends itself to being like a comedy in a pure, like the way the lines are delivered, the way some of the plots and everything about it, like I don't know, it just feels satirical, not in a so bad it's good way, but in the actual like satire itself.
Yeah, but that's not what this is, Craig.
Yeah.
It's not what it is. This doesn't like.
No.
This doesn't exist in like there is. It's one of my favorite subgenres of action movies that are 100% action movies, but also parody action movies. In this genre, you can find such films as RoboCop and Face Off and Con Air and things of that nature. But no, that doesn't. Like you also we talked about. You mentioned John Wick, and there was a Clive Owen action film in the mid 2000s called Shoot 'Em Up. These are the films that exist in this kind of subcategory of action movies. But no, it's not that.
No, this is a serious message film.
Yeah.
It's got a very serious message, which we'll get to later.
And it won't stop me from bringing it up again and again.
No, I agree.
Fair enough. Yeah. No, it's a fair point. And Michael Caine does get a very funny line here, as Kyle mentioned. I've looked it up. It's in the Seagal. It mentioned in the Seagalology book, so I've looked it up. The line he gives is, "Listen, if you have any great ideas, just keep them to your fucking self, okay? And leave this shit to me." Is the end of that line. So that's spectacular stuff. So Forrest Taft, he has many, many skills, and it appears hacking is also one of them, because that's what we get next. Mid-90s hacking.
We actually get, if you read the screen, you find out they're called like blowout preventers. So they're essentially supposedly there to stop a fire from breaking out, I guess, these MacGuffins. And then we see, that they have not passed their tests. They're not working.
Yeah, pretty much everything had failed except only a couple of them, I think.
Yeah.
And they couldn't, basically, the rig that they are building, this new rig that they're building called Aegis 1, the corporation is called Aegis, they have a deadline to build the rig and get the rig online, which is 13 days. And if they don't get it online, then the kind of oil rights revert back to the native tribal council that had them in the first place. And the reordering of these preventers is going to take like 90 days or something. And that's why they have these old faulty preventers that they're installing in this new rig.
Yes.
Important plot points that you should all know, listener.
And it'll come up again and again, because I think that's the only plot point that they have.
That's it.
It'll just be on repeat.
Yeah. So, it's kind of all fun and games, apart from kind of the bit that's like coming up, which it's kind of doesn't fit the tone of the movie. Like you've mentioned, Craig, it's a very silly movie. It's an over-the-top action movie that kind of reads like a kind of parody of an action movie. But, I mean, it's not. It's very serious business. This is Steven Seagal. But, yeah, the next scene is kind of, like, quite ugly. Like, when Magruder and Otto go and visit Seagal's good friend, Hugh Palmer, at his cabin. Does it someday want to take the lead on this one, Kyle?
Yes, they go to. They know that Hugh Palmer knows about these faulty preventers and this issue, and that he has some physical copy of it, some booklet, and a floppy disk, which is great to see has a key plot point. And he refuses to reveal that. And so they torture him to try and find out where this is. And they take some sort of weird...
A pipe cutter.
Well, before that, they have like a bone.
Yeah, they have like a big bone thing.
Yeah, which Sven Thorson uses to chop off Hugh's fingers one by one for a little bit, which I don't know. It didn't look like it was sharp enough to sever a finger. But that's just me. I'm not a henchman.
You obviously weren't paying attention in Henchman's show. Even blunt objects, if hit with the right velocity, can cut off fingers.
It almost looks like a polished tusk or something.
Okay,
like it was like a trophy or something. I don't know, some sort of.
Yeah, it does. It does look like a kind of like an elephant tusk or something. Some sort of like big.
And then they do get a pipe cutter to, I guess they cut his leg. I think it's kind of off screen, but yeah, all this is quite brutal. And John C. McGinley is losing his patience, and he doesn't want to do this.
No, his delivery of the line is perfect. There's no I in team.
Oh my God!
It's spelt TEAM.
And to go off what Craig has been commenting in terms of tone, I feel like throughout the movie, and especially this scene, you can look at these actors, and I feel a lot of empathy because I see John C. McGinley is on his own. Yeah. Like there's nobody helping him here, no direction.
Yeah, that is very true. Also, another brilliant quote from the Empire making of feature that I read was from John C. McGinley, where they put to him that he is one of the few people who can say that they were directed by Seagal. And he retorted, "I can barely claim that either."
Awesome.
Just tying in with what you were saying there. But yeah, like I just found this sequence is I think it's tonally like nastier than the rest of the film, and really I feel like it sticks out like a sore thumb. I feel like it's kind of like talking about other kind of bad movies. The scene in The Expendables where there's like a waterboarding sequence, like the rest, most of the rest of the movie is kind of silly, but then it's just like this one waterboarding torture sequence, and you're like, what? This is entirely from a different film.
It feels like it belongs in a different Seagal film too, because like most of the other ones we've covered up to now are pretty much revenge based, and this kind of becomes that based on this, but it has a whole other plot to begin with, whereas the other movies are just someone killed my friend and I'm out for justice.
Yeah, it does feel like it would fit, not because Hard to Kill's quite in that kind of sillier mode as well, but like, yeah, certainly a Mark for Death or an Out for Justice that tries to be kind of grittier in the first place. It probably fit better there. But talking about Seagal's kind of directorial choices, as you said, the leg being cut off with the pipe fitter is done off screen as we pan outside of Hugh's window onto the beautiful Alaskan landscape.
I mean, those landscape
and
shots are
blood.
Great, I'll just say.
Well, as this pan happens, blood from Hugh sprays onto the window.
Yeah.
Yes. Just so you know what's happening.
Flawless imagery.
Oh, well, this goes way back, but at the bar, Seagal is talking about he's going to stop over at his house to grab some gear because he wants to go out into the mountain, like his gun or stuff, things like that. So that's foreshadowing for
Yes, that becomes important later on in the movie. That's a very throwaway line that he has a bag up there at Hugh's cabin, which you just think like, well, you don't think anything of, but it comes with weird callbacks. Like weird callbacks was something that happened in Under Siege, Kyle, if you remember, with the car phone and the musician dating.
Yes,
we'll add this to the weird callbacks. Not necessarily a Seagal trope, but like just something that's happened in two films back to back.
It seems like it's important because there's evidence and stuff like that, but then it rarely is. Like it's not like he uses the evidence to then get everybody against. I don't know. We'll get into that.
He never really uses it at all. I guess maybe at the very end he must use it off screen.
That's true. But we can't go over every little detail, Craig, because this is going to take far too long. There's so much more insanity to come. Like we've not even reached the peak insanity of this film at all. We're still slowly getting there because it just gets kind of more bizarre as the film goes on. But anyway, we move on. We get a press conference from Jennings where he tries to blame everything on human error and the oil rig. You know, it was nothing really to do with us. Definitely wasn't to do with faulty parts. And then he gets harassed by the press. He gets harassed by the tribal council, and then we get introduced to another character in the film who you would be led to believe is one of the main characters, but is not really treated like a main character. It is the character of Masu, who is played by Joan Chen, who listeners may be most aware of for her role as Jocelyn Packard in Twin Peaks, or maybe that's just me. I don't know.
No, that's
she's great.
She's known for.
I mean, is there general agreement? Like, I feel like, okay.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
But there's another great Caine line where she throws oil on him, and he's being taken away really quick. He's like, "What is it?" And hers what is it? Press secretary or whatever.
She's a lawyer.
She says it's just oil, and he says, "Oh, thank God," or something like that.
Yeah, and then he gets angry about it again and says, "Oh, this was just a brand new." So this is kind of a weird moment.
Yeah, but then so after this point, well, I think the next scene is kind of where everything starts going into a blur for me. I have it in my notes.
Okay. So we get some more Seagal. What we'll refer to him from now on as his name, Forrest Taft, because it's such again. Oh, you should add this to your list, Craig.
Okay.
So Seagal often has like a funny name. So in the first film we covered, Hard to Kill, he's called Mason Storm. Okay. In the last film we covered, Under Siege, he's called Casey Ryback. Obviously in this film, he's called Forrest Taft. In the other two films that we covered, he has slightly more normal names. Marked for Death, he's called John Hatcher. And in Out for Justice, which is funny not because it's an unusual name, but just because it's so on the nose, he's an Italian-American detective called Gino Foligno.
It's the best name ever.
So, yeah, funny. You can add funny stroke unusual names to your list.
Okay, but it's all serious.
It's all serious. 100%. Yes. Okay. Yes.
So is this the point where, because they know he's been hacking, that the main double cross?
Yes, this is the point where the main double cross happens. So, like before this, like by this stage, Forrest knows everything. He knows he doesn't quite know everything, but he definitely knows that things are fishy, that he doesn't want anything to do with this corporation anymore. And he says to Jennings, "How much money is enough?" And in another great line to add to the what does it take to change the essence of a man? Some more great Seagal philosophizing.
And then Jennings immediately after asks him, "Can you just do one more job for me?" Right? And then
correct.
Then you can go on your way, or then we can have the talk about all these issues or something like that.
Yeah, that's okay. Right. That's right. And like for all his magnificent skills, Forrest is a real idiot in this scene.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I mean, this again. This happened in Marked for Death as well, where the Seagal character just walked into a trap that was like so clearly a trap.
Yeah, they don't make it secretive. It feels like anybody with a couple cents would be like, "Huh, I think they're going to double cross me right now."
It also feels weird because he could have just went to fucking Hugh's house to kick off the plot.
Yeah,
but he doesn't do that. He does not do that. Apparently, there's a fire on an oil substation, and he goes to deal with that. And of course, it's a trap. It's been booby-trapped with lots of explosions, and
his dead body is
we see Hugh's dead body with his leg missing and the pipe fitter. And so that is, and again, like he doesn't really react much to that, and Hugh is never mentioned again, really.
Yeah. Then he runs, or he starts to run away. They set off the bomb, and then he's blown, I don't know, probably like 20 feet or so, and they think he's just dead.
That is right.
Right. Yes.
But yeah. So even by action movie standards, that explosion would have killed him.
Yeah. Because he's engulfed in the flames too.
Oh yeah, he is completely in the fireball of it. And then that's when we get tribespeople, villagers going along on their sleds, and we get a random shot of a polar bear for fun times, because like the landscape and nature photography in this film is Rick Waite does a great job here.
So. Because I didn't know, were they hunting the polar bear, or was it just two separate things that there was
I think it was just two separate things. Like I think they were just heading back to their village and they saw a polar bear.
Okay. Well,
I think the polar bear was just there too, so it can show up in the spiritual quest montage coming up.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Oh, and we should keep track of these, right? So we had one at the start of the film. So once again, in the just before the random polar bear shot, we get the eagle caw sound. Caw!
Okay.
So second eagle caw sound.
And then he is saved because they see the smoke, and the chieftain of the tribe says that there's a man bear in the smoke.
Yes.
That is correct.
Sorry, the spirit of a man bear.
The spirit of a man bear, yes.
So they go to the smoke and rest.
I mean, we'll kind of quickly skip over some things. So, like, we get a second press conference from Jennings where apparently the rigs and the substation are being blamed on Hugh and Forrest. It's all sabotage, and that's that one sorted, which apparently nobody believes right off the bat. So he is really bad at lying.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I don't know, because it seems like throughout the whole time, nobody ever believes it at all. Any of the stuff he's doing.
No, he's not convincing at all. Like, everybody sees right through him.
But nobody thinks, well, maybe let's investigate this more.
But we need to race on because we have got some fun times ahead of us. So, Seagal wakes up in the tribal village and is being fed something by an old woman.
Who's chewing it for him.
Yeah. You wanted to mention this, Craig. I think you found this scene particularly funny.
Yeah, so this is where I thought, yes, there was all these kind of quirky moments, whatever. This moment right here was where it's like, okay, there has to be like obvious humor, because he's laying there. It's this weird shot of him laying there. I don't know how the lighting and everything, where you're just basically seeing his head. and he's not moving besides his head. And she's chewing it, and she goes to give him a little bit more. And instead of like moving away or anything at all, he just goes, "Ew." But it's this weirdest reaction in a way that could only be done in a comedy movie, I feel like.
Unless you're that unaware of your inability to perform and you're directing yourself.
And so that's when the whole wagon kicked off of like, okay, so what am I watching here? And, has become now the reoccurring note in that I keep talking about throughout this episode.
Which will only get worse. And now we have more pseudo-mysticism peppered in this scene. Like, this scene is great. Like, all the scenes in and around the village are really real fun times. So we have like a weird conversation where we should point out that like Seagal did seem to go to the effort of at least employing people who were actually Alaskan natives. But, apart from Joan Chen, who is Chinese, and again, that seems to be like one of those Hollywood logic things of just being like, looks close enough. But anyway, Masu is interpreting for the kind of chieftain of the village, who was subtitled in the first time we saw him, but now is no longer subtitled and is just translated by Masu for a bunch of scenes. And yes, we learn that he thinks that Steven Seagal is a bear. And Steven Seagal says, "No, translate this. I am a mouse hiding from the hawks in the house of the ravens."
I wrote that down.
It's what a quote.
I mean, that is a line that was written down by... No, that's a line that was definitely a Seagal number. I don't think that was in the original script.
If I get another tattoo, I'm going to have that one.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. See, Kyle, if again we talked previously about the possibility of T-shirts and the kind of superior like superior attitude, superior state of mind. That's another one. That's another great one.
Yes,
for the back of the T-shirt.
That would have to go with a picture of Seagal making that disgusted face.
So if you're interested in these T-shirts, we could start producing them, and you can buy them on.
They'll have all 90s action all the time on the front, and then various Seagal quotes on the back. This is going to be the best line of T-shirts ever, guys. What I love even more about this is when he says this, the look on Joan Chen's face. Like, she looks disgusted to be having to translate this bullshit.
So, I don't even know where to go. I think it could have been, I don't even, because I've watched enough movies for the podcast or stuff like this late at night.
Mm-hmm.
But this was like one of those where I was clearly awake. I had caffeine in me.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like I was tired, but it was like, this is where the blurring like, what is... It's happening now, especially when we get to the spiritual trip that's about to take place.
These movies can induce some sort of brain fog.
Yeah,
that is true. I tend to. I mean, I have watched them a couple of times before, but also I do a bunch of pausing and taking notes and stuff like that. So so I keep everything in order. So. Yeah, we should kind of skip along to we get a couple other scenes. We get a scene of Magruder and Otto looking for Seagal. Actually, to be fair, we should point this one out because again, it has one of those magnificent Seagal kind of tropes. Basically, Jennings, when Magruder and Otto are looking for him, says, "If there's no body, it means he must be alive." And this is one of many kind of just how manly, tough, badass is Forrest Taft. Well, he's the goddamn toughest son of a bitch who's ever lived. Yeah. We get more magnificent examples of that later on, but we should now kind of head along to the Spirit Quest.
But that's what right before we do, I had one thing about it of that. So Jennings knows that Forrest doesn't know everything about Forrest, but he knows that Forrest is like this special guy who is the toughest and all this stuff, but yet he never divulges that information to MacGruber or whatever beforehand or anything like that. It's just
and he doesn't just hire him as like the security guy.
Yeah.
Yes. But and this is a spoiler. This is a spoiler towards the end of the movie that we'll discuss again at the end of the movie. But much like in the last movie we covered, Under Siege, at the end of this movie, it is suggested that the relationship Seagal's character has with the main villain is much closer than has been portrayed throughout the rest of the goddamn movie, which doesn't make any sense. But we'll get to that when we get there.
Now on to the trip.
So we get Masu is again translating stuff, and before we get to the trip, we get like a little bit of a speech from the chief about a bear, about like Seagal being a bear, and during this speech we get 2 more eagle caws. So like that's 4 calls. So yeah, just so you know what kind of movie you're in, it's mystical. Eagle call, mystical. That's how that math adds up. But I think we should go through this. Like, so the chief hits Forrest Taft with a feather. Then, in his dream spirit walk, Seagal, Forrest Taft, becomes an eagle, soaring over the skies. Then, we see a bear. Forrest fights with the bear with a knife. This is intercut with a kind of weird tribal ritual, which apparently has to be performed topless.
Yes.
Then, after fighting the bear, he is thrown into a river by the bear. He then goes into a cave. He is confronted by 2 women. One is an elderly lady shaking a maraca, who is apparently Mother Nature. The other is a completely naked tribal woman who is maybe the devil? Anyway, she's tempting Seagal, Forrest Taft over with her wily ways, and the old woman is just shaking the maraca and kind of looking at him, kind of like, talk to me. And Forrest Taft has to make a decision. Will he be lured by the naked seductress, why is... Or will he go and talk to this elderly... Well, of course he goes and talks to the elderly woman because he picks the wise path, because Seagal... Forrest Taft is a wise man. Now, he then talks to the elderly woman, who is apparently Mother Nature, and asks her why is she suffering, and basically all the things that people are doing to the land are making her suffer, and she has chosen him, specifically Forrest Taft, to be the bear, the protector of the land, and she wants him to make people fear the bear again. Yes, Mother Nature herself has appointed Steven Seagal as the savior of the world.
The spirit warrior, too, they call it, right?
Yeah, that's a good spirit warrior. Oh, yeah, and then once the spirit quest is over, he emerges triumphantly from a pool of water. I mean, either of you can try and unpack that if you want.
All I know is he's wearing like a different hoodie.
Oh, yeah, he comes out with a different kind of Eskimo jacket. Yeah, when he emerges.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, that's as much as I got, but yeah, all I can tell is that the they really make sure to punch that bear element even by the end, because he comes out of the water and his arms are spread apart, and it's like everything you see in those nature videos when you're watching a grizzly bear underwater. So
like Seagal went proper method for that. He studied bears for months, just to get the right reaction.
So it's not going to be a wolf. It's not a fox. He's a bear.
No. I just want both of you to let that sink in, that Mother Nature herself has appointed Forrest Taft as the savior of the world to protect the environment single-handedly.
And yet it almost doesn't even come up until the very end.
Yeah, I was going to say,
there's a point where when he has to start fighting, where he's like, we'll get to it, but I understand I'm this warrior, but that has to wait. It's just thrown away. Then he was appointed the spirit warrior, but now
that's because we live in pause. We live in this world, Craig.
Yeah,
where this violence is happening. We have to face it.
We have to live in the real world. Yeah, he talks about that a little bit later. We can get to that in a minute. Right. So next up, we get Magruder, who has basically tracked Forrest to the village, suspecting that he is there, and bullies everyone, and just does kind of typical John C. McGinley stuff, where he's like a kind of tough guy, but he's like a kind of cowardly, whiny, tough guy. And he shoots the chief. Like, basically, there's a scuffle, and he shoots him, and then basically makes all sorts of excuses that it was totally self-defense, totally what was the other guy's fault, wasn't him, and then runs back off in a helicopter.
Which nobody believes at any point that it was self-defense.
Yes.
He tries to tell that story to everyone in the same way with Jennings, trying to come up with all these excuses. Just nobody believes it. Know the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Jennings even mocks him for it, of everybody believes that, he did it in front of like a dozen witnesses. Great.
Yeah. So
in that kind of same scene, we get like a little bit of like they've got the FBI in like at that point, and like it's the only time law enforcement comes up. It's like, it's mentioned like all of twice. That the character who's like the FBI character comes in like all of twice, does nothing. And people are indiscriminately killed, property has exploded, like law enforcement does not exist in this movie, really.
No, not at all.
No.
It's Alaska.
Even when we'll get to it later, the climax, but they mention like, how are we going to kill him now that the FBI's here? And then they just go on about shooting each other like crazy.
Well, by the end, the FBI guy even just runs away. It's not like he even does anything.
That is true. That's true. He's just in those two scenes, and one of them, he's just running away.
What I like kind of moving forward is that, as the chieftain is dying, Forrest comes up to him, everybody's surrounding him, and his big whole spiel, I guess this emotional connection, is that he tells her to just tell the chief, thank you and goodbye. Like, that's it. That's his big, like, sentimental goodbye to this man that's apparently changed his life, and he loves, as he says later on.
I like that it seems like Joan Chen is going to have something to do finally in this movie, and then they're like, no, we're not really going to deal with her father's death that much.
No, that is true.
He even says to Magruder that I'll watch you die. But then she isn't even there, I think, for when, spoiler alert, he does die.
That is true. She's not. So, definitely there's all these kind of moments where it's like she feels like I said, when she's first introduced, she feels like she's supposed to be a main character, but she's like just totally sidelined at every opportunity, and is just an entirely decorative presence.
it seems like it makes more sense now when you were talking at the beginning about the original script, that maybe it was supposed to be the two of them more so, and then with Seagal, coming in and wanting more Seagal, that character just kind of faded. So you see the little remnants of the
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But basically, they head on back. They head on back to town. Seagal is Forrest Taft is completely recovered from his wounds that he picked up in the explosion. That's all good now, and they head back to our old friend Hugh Palmer's house. And the callback. That's how it happens now. Yeah, he goes back to get that bag, and luckily, in that bag, what's in that bag, Kyle?
A floppy disk with important information.
Oh, wow.
The same one that they won't use now, even though...
Yeah, that's never going to come up later.
And in, one of the movie's many, many odd moments, apparently also in that bag is clothing and shoes that will fit Miss Sue.
Yes, apparently she's the same size as Hugh.
Lucky.
But the henchmen happen to find them. That
is true
too,
and because Forrest Taft is now in action mode, we get another jacket change, and he now has a leather jacket.
And that's where it comes up that, well, he shouldn't be resorting to violence. He's the spirit warrior, and he should be above all that. And all of this whole journey that he just went through, the spiritual journey, is tossed out the window because he's got killing to do.
That is true, and because he has to stop off at another friend. We should mention in this action sequence, there's two things I want to mention about the action sequence that happens at Hugh's house. One, there's a very odd edit where he shoots a guy in front of him, but it looks like he shoots him with a shotgun that's pointing towards the ceiling, but he actually shoots him with a 45 that he's got in his other hand, which I had to watch the scene twice to pick that up.
Oh, I didn't even catch. Yeah, I know there's a couple weird edits like that, but I didn't even catch that one.
Kyle, did you see that? I don't know. Maybe you saw the 45 in his hand all along, and maybe it was just my viewing. No. But I thought it was it just looked like he shot him with that shotgun, which was obviously pointing towards the ceiling, but it was the guy was straight in front of him. I was really confused by it, so I rewound that bit and was like, "Oh no, he's got a gun in his other hand." Right? Okay, I did notice that now.
It seemed like there was supposed to be another henchman, somewhere else. That's what it seemed like to me. They cut something. I don't know. It was weird editing, where it seemed like he was supposed to be shooting someone upstairs, on the balcony or something. I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah, because that's the thing I caught, whereas I thought I didn't notice the gun part, but I thought, wait, it felt like Kyle was saying that another henchman just came out of nowhere.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other thing that we should mention, because again, it's kind of one of those Seagal tropes of an imposing figure who looks like they're going to be a threat, just isn't a threat at all. And so Sven Thorson, who is, the typical silent, brooding, menacing Sven Thorson type, he looks like he can kick a lot of ass, who'd probably be a threat. Nope. No, he's taken out by 3 clubs to the head and a clothesline. And that's him. Where he's presumed dead because he's not seen again.
Yeah.
Yes. And right before that, though, there's a moment where Seagal's machine gun jams, so he goes hand to hand with another henchman, and Sven just watches that. That's where I was like, why just shoot Seagal? Just shoot him in the back of the head.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. No, he just watches on because he really wants to go, because he's a manly man too, so he wants to go toe to toe with him, but it doesn't work out so well.
90s or 80s and 90s action movies, though. They don't take advantage like that. They want to.
They have honor.
Yeah, because I mean, even in like really good films, there's the classic scene in like Fist of Fury where there's like 20 guys around Bruce Lee, all of whom come at him one at a time in the big circle that is around him. It's always done in a kind of convenient way.
True.
Also coming up is, again, one of my other favorite lines in the film is, as we've discussed, so Craig, this is definitely already on your list, that the point has to be driven home at all times that any Steven Seagal character, this character, Forrest Taft, is the toughest, baddest ass man who's ever lived. So Michael Caine at this stage delivers this line about Forrest Taft and the greatness of Forrest Taft. McGregor basically is like, oh, how bad is this guy? And Jennings gives this response. Delve down to the deepest bowels of your soul. Try to imagine the ultimate fucking nightmare. And that won't even get close to this son of a bitch when he gets pissed.
Why would you leave killing him to chance? That's what
exactly.
If you know this information from the beginning, why would you be like, maybe, let's just double cross him like we would anybody else?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like Jennings does seem to have his number in terms of like knowing this background information that nobody else knows, and he doesn't bother to impart on anybody until this point in the film, which is about 3/4 of the way through the film.
Yeah.
So at this point they have to bring in the big guns, and who's the big guns played by, Craig?
It's I know there's
Arlie Emery.
Yeah, good save there, Kyle. Who's the big guns played by, Kyle?
Billy Bob Thornton.
Yes.
No, Billy Bob Thornton's later. We'll discuss Billy Bob Thornton later. We're on Arlie Emery right now.
Okay.
Well, and then we find out that we get even more backstory. We get Arlie Emery, we get in the helicopter, and we get that Seagal is maybe CIA, maybe NSA, maybe Department of Defense.
And so that's where I wrote down the note, which apparently is a trope, as you guys have talked about. But as I was watching it, I wrote, so he's CIA because? ? They needed reasoning for us.
Oh, they don't need reasoning. No.
Yeah, you don't. All you need is a file, Craig.
Okay.
There doesn't even have to be anything in it.
Okay.
I mean, this is like the Seagal origin story, because like in his very first film, which we won't talk about because it was made in the 80s, Nico or Above the Law, depending where you saw that movie. Again, he's a cop who has a mysterious CIA background. So like, from his very first film, this is like a thing.
Okay, yeah, which makes sense now listening to you guys talk about it. But yeah, while I was watching it, I was like, this little bit of information, the same with Jennings, is popping up now this late in the movie.
Yeah, after many failed murder attempts where you would think they would mention these important pieces of information.
Nope. Yeah.
Like I don't hold to story structure completely, whatever. But usually there's information that you bring in early on so it can pay off later.
That is true.
Yes.
Talking about story structure, we get like a big kind of exposition dump when we look into Q's floppy disk at the house of Johnny Redfeather, who is a friend of Forrest Taft. And so we get more dialogue about preventers, and then this is where it kind of gets confusing, because like Forrest's plan is to blow up the rig, but the rig was going to blow up because it's unstable, but the way he's going to blow it up will not cause an oil spill, whereas the way it will blow up itself will cause it caused me a headache, this scene.
It would send the toxins back into something.
Yeah, and pollute the water, but the way he's going to implode it will not cause that. Like, it won't cause an oil spill, it won't pollute the water. And then like Masu like makes the entirely reasonable point that she has contacts in the press and they could just like they now have the information and they could just make a scandal of it
but this is like man's world and we have to deal with that.
I wrote down for all these monologues that he's doing, the way he's delivering them, it feels like somebody who either doesn't know his lines that well, and so he's just trying to remember. Like if you, I don't know, have seen an actor,
I very much think
lines.
the monologues are Seagal.
Yeah.
Because this is another thing. Probably another thing you should add to your list that Seagal often adds in his own like little monologues in his movies. Like, and he often tries to rewrite things and like. We in one episode, the episode for Mark for Death, we talked about how like Seagal thought he had rewrote like something like 93% of the script and went to arbitration with the Writers Guild of America, which to get credit on the film, and he did not get that credit. His case was thrown out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's made those claims about pretty much every movie to some degree or another that he like was also a writer.
Yes.
So there's a reason why nobody wants to work with him anymore.
Many reasons.
Oh yeah. Many reasons. Like one of the other ones is like he often does his own fight choreography and he often stiffs stunt guys by like not movie punching them, but like punching them.
Which I'm sure you read this when you were researching it, Scott, but apparently you supposedly did that to Sven.
Yes, apparently so.
Yes.
So then we're moving on to the point where we see that he has a bunch of guns and explosives and basically a whole army's worth of weaponry.
What makes this we should also mention what makes this particularly magnificent is he keeps this in a cabin halfway up a mountain that can only be accessed via horse
or helicopter.
No, they specifically say it can only be accessed on horseback. Because that's why Arlie Emery and his crew get off their helicopter and go onto their horses. And again, Masu, who makes good points throughout the movie that are completely ignored, says, "Why do you have this?" You know, like I think she says something like, "In case you want to start a war with a small country or something, or blow up half of a small country," and like. Forrest just kind of agrees. He just kind of like, yeah, just in case. Moving on, let's pack up these explosives.
So then the helicopter comes that has just basically the pilot and one gunman to, I guess, keep tabs on them while the rest of the mercenary team is coming up to get them.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
Yep.
And that's when he instead basically ditches most of these guns and everything to blow up the cabin.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That is right.
Yeah, and the helicopter smashing that looks like a toy copter or something. I don't know, smashing against a huge rock wall.
Yeah, no, there's some fun miniature work right there. That's it's entertaining stuff.
And then we get to see him go all Rambo.
That's right, and just making all these kind of like little explosive devices while the other guys come for them on horseback, and they discover one of the explosive devices and get all smug about it, of being like, "Oh, he didn't hide this well. Maybe he's not quite the badass that we read up on." Immediately, that guy and another guy fall into a secondary booby trap. He obviously deliberately set one up that was very visible and then set up other ones that weren't. And those guys die. And then Magruder, being the John C. McGinley kind of cowardly badass, just goes mental at this point and just does his kind of own version of the scene in Predator and just shoots just shoots randomly, aimlessly into the forest, which Arlie Emery quite rightly is like, what the fuck are you doing? Who are you shooting at? Ah, dear. Yeah. So, and then we get like, does one of you, like, Kyle, do you want to take the epic horse chase that follows?
Yes. I mean, basically, they go down this very steep hill. And we do, in this bit, we get introduced to Billy Bob Thornton in here somewhere. But basically, we end up at sort of a ravine that is just barely jumpable by horse. So Seagal throws over a pack of what it must be the floppy disk and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And him and Joan Chen jump this gap and leave a bomb on the other side that goes off just as Arlie Emery and crew arrive and get away for the moment, but they know where they're going. The Aegeus 1.
That's right. We're heading to the big oil rig finale at Aegis 1. And we get another fun line as well. So like Aegis, like, you know, we kind of discussed this again. The FBI have been called, and they kind of discussed like, how are we going to, you know, track him down and kill him with the FBI president, which they then totally ignore. And again, we get another just how tough is Forrest Taft line where Jennings tells Magruder that he is the patron saint of the impossible.
Well, at some point in there too, doesn't Emery talks about some little whole thing about how awesome he is.
There is a bit that comes up as well that's pretty epic. I think maybe we should read that out as well. This is the kind of final little bit of just how badass is this character. Arlie Emery says the following. My guy in DC tells me we're not dealing with a student here. We're dealing with a professor. Anytime the military has an operation that can't fail, they call this guy in to train the troops, okay? He's the kind of guy that would drink a gallon of gasoline so you could piss in your campfire. You could drop this guy off in the Arctic Circle wearing a pair of bikini underwear without his toothbrush, and tomorrow afternoon he's going to show up at your poolside with $1 million smile and a fistful of pesos. This guy's a professional. You got me?
It just, I don't know. It almost goes to like, what is it, that Kung Pao movie where the characters, to show how great he is, he says, I go pee-pee standing up. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's just all this talk about it. And again, my recurring quote of, like, how is it not? I was cracking up at that point. I think I woke my wife and my child from just laughing.
Yeah, I can see why you thought this was some sort of kind of Black Dynamite style spoof, you know, but it's really not. It's very serious business. And then we kind of get like a flurry of action sequences, like Forrest. I don't know like why Forrest at first goes to the effort of like making that plastic bottle silencer when everyone else he just kills in incredibly loud and flashy fashion. Like, you know, first he goes in there, you know, like he's Solid Snake, and then he totally ignores that for the rest of this mission to blow up this oil rig.
Well, he even shoots it through glass, which makes noise anyway, so it's not even completely like this silent.
But what you're forgetting is that making that cool silencer just makes him look cool.
Yeah, he takes the time.
That is true. That's true.
That's what we're trying to hammer home here.
How cool and tough is Forrest Taft?
Yeah. But yeah, he makes sure to pour out the Coke and everything too, or whatever. I think it's probably like Coke or Pepsi or something.
Yeah, and then so like basically there is a fun scene where like Magruder basically jumps ship, and the female lawyer that is called Lyles, is played by an actress called Sherry Static. They basically both bail as well. She bails in a very funny way. He bails in a kind of like, this is insane, I'm not getting paid enough for this shit. And she bails by like being like, I just need to go to the bathroom.
And then everybody else bails when Jennings leaves the room for a second. A whole crowd of people.
Yeah, as soon as he turns his back, every one of his employees is like, nah, I'm not going out with this asshole. That's not going to happen.
Which, again, why would the owner of an oil company... He's doing a lot of like hands-on work for somebody that's supposed to be like a CEO of the company.
It's a fair point. It's a fair point. He does turn up a lot as like in these scenes. I don't like. It's funny because like as you mentioned, he's kind of a fun character, but he's also of the movies we've covered. He's the weakest villain. Apart from Senator Trent, who was the villain in the first movie we covered, Hard to Kill, like all the other villains are like really good, like really kind of powerful on-screen presences. Screwface and Mark for Death, and William Forsythe's mad character Richie in Out for Justice, and the possibly even more madcap duo of Tommy Lee Jones and Gary Busey in Under Siege. But yeah, so I mean, this, and I suppose like I know he's not supposed to be a threat to Forrest Taft or Seagal's character. He's just that kind of typical villainous businessman, and he hands everything off to his kind of lackeys and stuff. But yeah, I mean, fun character, but as a villain, kind of weak.
Yeah. But
anyway, yeah. So Magruder, he carks it. He like before he can get onto the helicopter. Like Forrest manages to track him down, but like sadly, again, like Sven Thorst's character's death was a bit disappointing. Magruder's death is a bit disappointing as well because he dies off screen. He just he dies kind of Raider style, and you just see the blood in the blades.
And then the lawyer, Lyles, you said? Right?
Yeah, she goes out in properly gruesome fashion.
She's getting away, but then has to go and make some snide comment while she's passing by Forrest, which then leads her to run right into basically an oil truck.
And working into your theory that it's all a parody, Craig, she dies in classic movie fashion, where she takes her hands off the wheel of the car as she knows she's going to drive into, or like a gas tanker, and just crosses her arms over her face.
And it was easily avoidable. It's not like she was going that fast or anything.
Yeah, no, it's a proper kind of Austin Powers moment.
Yeah,
but the violence of that scene is a bit jarring because like she dies in quite a gruesome, like the way she's like super bloody and stuff. It's again, there's a kind of bit of nastiness in that scene that I get. Apart from the death of Hugh, the torture sequence of Hugh, it's not as. I suppose it's made up for by the fact that it's quite stupid and it is a bit Austin Powersy.
It feels like that death should have been for Magruder because he was kind of the main threat. She was just, off doing whatever. She was never, I don't know. It seems like you'd want to save it for somebody that deserved it more. I don't know.
I agree. Yeah, it feels very mean-spirited when she didn't really do anything on screen that was that bad.
And
she did want to cut everybody's compensation packet.
Yeah.
I mean, that was her main act of villainy, but which compared to the other people who are out there, killing and torturing and ordering killing and torturing, it doesn't seem that bad. I mean, but it does seem like she gets a more extreme death than her crimes. Like the various other characters, like Magruder, like Sven Hallthorne, a bunch of the other main villains don't get as kind of a gruesome and as explosive death as she gets. So you do wonder, why she got the treatment she did.
Yeah.
But being a good union guy, she wanted to cut the compensation packet. So hey.
Yeah. True.
So again, It feels like I'm just saying everything is like one of those weird moments in this film. But again, we get another weird moment in this film where like we've mentioned that Billy Bob Thornton plays a henchman.
Yes.
He's great.
And now we get a completely random henchman conversation, which feels like it's out of a Shane Black movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where Billy Bob Thornton is talking about his gun and whether to have the stack in or out the machine gun, and because one way makes him he just feels cooler, he feels more solid that way, and he thinks it'll look better, and it's just such a random scene, and then they become like these two henchmen become like the Statler and Waldorf of this situation. And they just provide like a kind of commentary where like Billy Bob Thornton was like, "I told you this fucker was good." That's
yeah. All the chaos is happening, probably 50 to 100 feet below, and they're just kind of talking about how, oh, look what's going on over there. Again, how is that not? How can somebody write that and be not thinking it was comedic?
I've no idea. It's like genuinely, it is like they got Shane Black to write one scene in the movie.
Yeah.
Of being like, yeah, just do your typical meta Shane Black stuff, just for this one scene. You don't get to write any of the other scenes in the movie. Just this one. Okay. Oh dear. We haven't yet.
Blow up. Yeah. They don't even really get to have any sort of proper death. It's just they point their guns at the elevator. And
that's right. Yeah. So, Forrest orders Masu to load up the elevator and send the elevator up. It's packed with explosives. Billy Bob Thornton and the other henchman. I don't know who the other henchman is. But anyway, they both shoot at it. It explodes. They die. That's the end of them, which is a shame because I would have liked the whole, this whole segment of the movie to have this meta commentary from these two henchmen. I think that would have been great. But we can't get that. We now move on to more Arlie Emery. We get Rambo Emery as he emerges from the oil to attack Forrest Taft and lasts all of 2 seconds because Forrest immediately disarms him, spins his shotgun around, and shoots Emery with his own shotgun. Or I should say Stone. His character was called Stone, if I've not mentioned that before.
It's just, I don't know, because there's normally a style to action movies. Again, I am the novice here, but everything is just too easy. It feels like there should be struggle. That's like why you root for these heroes and everything. But for Seagal, it's like even the toughest of the tough guys are just, there's no struggle, I guess.
Well, this is the 5th movie that Kyle and I have covered, and so far, he's only. I mean, he was put in a coma in the first movie we covered, but then he was shot about 6 times with various shotguns. And one of the villains, Screwface 2, oh no, we can't explain that. But anyway, briefly in Marked for Death, one of the villains get the upper hand. We're not going through that again. The upper hand on him. No. Remember that, Kyle? He knocked him into a bar? Very briefly. And then he smashed his face off a bar as well. Very briefly got the upper hand. No, nobody gets the upper hand on that. Again, you should add that to your list. He is invincible. Basically in kind of action movie history, because Seagal actually does it to an even bigger extent, but in action movie history, there's only been 2 major action stars, I feel, that are completely invincible in all their movies, and the other one is Bruce Lee. But Seagal does a kind of even more extreme version of what the Bruce Lee thing, and Bruce Lee is kind of naturally cooler and more charismatic. I'm not knocking Bruce Lee at all. Big fan. I don't know. Again, this is an integral part of his persona that he is completely invincible and yeah, nobody gets the drop on him, and he can deal with most villains in short shrift, even ones that have been built up throughout the movie as a genuine threat to him. They never end up being a genuine threat.
So I guess does that take us to?
I think this episode has just become Kyle and Scott explain the rules of Seagal to Craig.
I mean, yeah, it had to happen.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
So does this take us to the point where Jennings, again, the CEO, by himself is twisting the knobs and doing all the hands-on work to try and fix
everybody is left right now, to be fair. But yes, continue, Craig.
He's turning that that wheel, whatever, he's spinning it to do something oil-related, I'm guessing.
Yeah, something. It's never explained what he thinks is going to happen when he does that, or like what the purpose of that action is. But yes,
yeah. And so they're confronted, and you think there might be a standoff. No, he says, "Well, you're too much of a." He starts to walk past Forrest, saying, "What, you're too honorable with your macho."
He says. You're a macho man with a code of honor, and that's where, we should mention before he says that, they have a brief conversation, and now again, much like in Under Siege, where there's a kind of last minute thing where we think that the relationship is much closer than it's been previously portrayed. There is a line that Jennings says towards Masu, that basically that Forrest and him got hookers in Bangkok that were hotter than that.
Yes.
Which, you're like, wait, what? Were they just I thought he was just somebody who had recently joined the company as a firefighter, learned the error of his ways, and then, how long was he at the corporation? Was he super close with Jen? It just opens a lot of. I mean, and maybe it's just a sarcastic remark, but I feel like it opens up a bunch of questions about their relationship.
Yeah, no,
yes,
it definitely does. Because in the beginning that Forrest is supposed to be a local type of thing, and then that's what I don't understand, because there's the whole conversation about you used to be a good person from his friend. And all this stuff. So it seems like this relationship with Jennings is something that happened at least fairly recently.
Yes.
It feels like another thing that was probably in the earlier script, where they were trying to make him more of a corrupt guy who was an alcoholic and all these things, and is going to turn it around for this movie.
Yeah. He was maybe it was maybe better established that he was actually an employee for this company for a long time, and kind of knew, didn't have the evidence that they were doing super bad shit, but kind of knew that they were, suspected, but kind of buried that, and
for the money or whatever.
Yeah, buried that for the money, but that's never explored, and it's only kind of hinted at, and it's hinted at in such a weird way. You're just you don't understand the relationship at all, because at some points in the movie, it seems like he's only been an employee for about 5 minutes. He'd previously turned his back on whatever local job he was doing for more money. But then by this point in the movie, and at certain other points in the movie, it seems like he's had this long standing relationship with Jennings.
Especially since Jennings knows so much about his history. Or at least knows that he's such a badass.
Yeah, they went to Bangkok together.
Yeah. That opens up a lot of questions as well. Because initially, when Arlie Emery's crew is after him, they keep going on about how top secret the files on him are, and how he basically doesn't have a personal history before 1987, and yet Jennings apparently knows a whole bunch of stuff on him.
Yeah, it almost seems like they would have a whole military backstory. They were both in the military together, but we don't have time for that.
Yeah, we don't have time for
That's a whole nother movie.
That's a whole better movie.
Yeah. That's the movie I've created in my head. The other one. So he lassos them, even though he said you're too telling him that he's macho and that he wouldn't shoot a man in the back or whatever.
He wouldn't shoot an unarmed man in the back because he's too much of a macho man with a code of honor, which is true. He doesn't shoot him in the back. But what does he do, Craig?
He lassos him, which Jennings doesn't really put up much of a fight. He just gets pulled away. And then they hang him up on a hook over big vat of oil, and they were just going to leave him there. But instead, she wants to see him fall. And so they cut the rope. Well, they shoot the rope.
You should mention, because I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't mention one of the great one-liners where Jennings says, kill me, you coward, and basically taunts him. And Forrest quips, I wouldn't dirty my bullets. And
yes.
and then at that point, it looks like Forrest is genuinely going to just leave him hanging. And then Masu goes, just dirty one for me. And then he shoots the thing. Awesome.
And then he falls into the big vat of oil.
Yes.
And that's the end of the Oh, wait, no, hang on.
No. There's more.
We have the lecture series.
Before we get to the lecture, I have to point out my favorite slow-mo moment here.
Oh, yeah.
So now they're running out of this soon-to-be exploding oil rig, and there's a moment where a duct, a piece of round air duct, falls down, and it's about a foot high that anyone could jump over. But Steven Seagal leaps over it in slow motion. Oh, it's so good.
We should say as well, talking about slow motion, that Jennings falls Hans Gruber style in slow mo.
Yes.
Oh dear. So guys, you wanna flip a coin? Who wants to take the lecture?
I mean, it might be my favorite part of the movie.
So do it, Kyle.
Kyle, you do it, Kyle. I'm sure I have faith that you're going to do this a lot of justice.
Oh, yes. So I'm sure it's sometime later. We don't know. Now we're at a meeting of some native people and certainly probably some other important officials. And Seagal Forrest gives a presentation on the ills of these oil companies on the environment and how we're destroying the environment, which is, destroying our food and our water, and the media is distracting us from this horribleness. And what are we going to do about this? And there's a whole montage that is just amazing. and then when he's done, I mean, there's some native people that perform sort of some kind of ritual and are burning some sort of incense. And I guess Seagal saved the entire environment. We don't see that, but I think that would be what happens as the credits roll.
My only issue with that whole thing is that when the chieftain dies, he specifically says to Seagal, this is just, I guess, one of my little notes, I guess. I didn't have many. He says, at the end of all of this, I'll see you on the lake. Whatever, but you never see him on the lake.
Yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
No, wait a second, Craig. You're wrong.
I missed that.
Yes,
because yes, you do. After the amazing lecture, which again, in typical Seagal style, actually hits on a lot of true points, but he does it in such a heavy-handed, convoluted and bizarre way that the message gets completely lost. So yes, Craig, there is a mid-credit scene with Forrest Taft and Masu in a canoe, and they see a raven flying above the water. So he does meet the chief in the water once again.
Okay. So then, I missed it.
You need to look that up on YouTube or something. it's so good. I didn't even catch the dialogue that that's a callback for, and I was just letting the credits roll, and it stopped for that scene, and I was like, I just died laughing.
So and that's the end of the movie. Yeah, and then that's it. So yeah, that was the callback was there, Craig. You just obviously didn't watch all of the credits.
Yeah, no, I was probably totally checked out by the end, so I was just done.
It's understandable.
After you get a whole Greenpeace lecture, which I'd rather listen to, like an actual scientist or somebody else talk about it.
I wouldn't. They should be playing that lecture on loop at every school, everywhere.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's actually kind of graphic too. Like it shows dead animals.
Yeah,
it is. It is. I mean, like, I'm totally with Kyle, by the way, Greg. Like, it's up there. It is like one of the great movie speeches. It's right up there with Bill Pullman's President's speech on Independence Day, with Rocky Balboa's, like, if I can change and you can change, then we all can change. And he brings down the fall of communism at the end of Rocky IV. It's right up there with those ones, man. It's it's an absolute belter.
And the sad part is how much of it is actually true. And
it's a fair point. Yeah. Like, yeah, no, because I mean, like, he does it in this kind of bizarre, sprawling way where it hits on kind of corporate polluters, the fact that regulators have this kind of light touch regulation that's kind of controlled by the corporations, by the ignoring of alternative energies, the killing of various animal species. Like, he actually kind of hits on good points. He just makes them in bad ways.
Yeah, that protesters are made to look like the enemy, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true. That they're made to look like that they're kind of crazy and stuff like that, which a lot of people, have been throughout history, have been kind of tarred as kind of nuts and stuff like that. It's So there is good stuff in there. It's just it is the delivery of the message. And the messenger is the key problem there. So yeah, and that's it. That's on Deadly Ground. The as we discussed at the start of the top of the show, the most Seagal movie that's ever been made. And
Seagal.
yes, exactly. And that's it. It was his only directorial effort, which is kind of strange because he once he went into direct to video, he had even more kind of control over creative control as a producer and stuff over his career. And it's kind of odd that he never made one again, but he never did.
Shame.
You sounded really believable there, Craig. It's shame he never did that again. I'm totally saddened that he never repeated his experience and created a longer sequel based on the life and times of Jennings up until this movie. So I suppose that all that leaves me to do is say goodbye for myself. And, cheerio from Craig.
Thank you for having me again, and goodbye, everyone.
And Kyle.
Great to be here, as always, and, please take care of the environment.
In the last couple of episodes, I've had a kind of sign-off line from one of the movies, but, just basically remember... rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, all those things. It really helps with the algorithms. And I'm just going to concur with Kyle, take care of the environment and go and listen to that speech on YouTube because you're definitely going to learn something.